Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to MIT SEAG's Investment Track webinar. This is our third webinar of the series, and I am so pleased to have two very experienced impact investors who make direct investment in pre-seed, seed stage enterprises join us this morning. We have Wendy Wolfson, who is partner of Next Wave Impact, and John Aliff, chairman and founder of 124. And you will hear from both of them shortly. So my name is Sayuri Sharper, and I am the president of the SEAG Alumni Group. Just to give you a little bit background about us, we are organized under MIT Alumni Association, and we thank the Alumni Association in supporting us and providing the capability to do webinars for our community. The mission of our group is to build a community around MIT affiliates and friends that promotes and supports social entrepreneurship and impact investing to build a better world. And our job is to collaborate with other like-minded organizations as well to promote this community. For this year, we've been sponsoring two webinar series, the Investor Track webinar, which this is a third of, and the Entrepreneur Track webinar. And our next webinar is going to be the Entrepreneur Track. And we have a very interesting topic, which is ABCs of fundraising. So this is two social entrepreneurs discussing their experience in fundraising. So it's kind of the flip side of the investor perspective. And the last webinar for the investment track, instead of direct investments, we'll talk about funds and public equity investing. So contrasting that with direct investments. And our last entrepreneur track webinar is going to be led by a social entrepreneur who used to be a corporate attorney at Wilson Sonsini doing negotiation for investors. So he is going to give a masterclass in negotiating terms with your investors. In addition to our own webinars, we also co-sponsor with other organizations. We had the Career in Impact Investing, which was co-sponsored with a Sloan School initiative called MIT Impact Investing Initiative. And we will also have a webinar about effective mentoring, which will be co-sponsored with MIT Solve and Miller Center DSBI, which is an accelerator program. So how to engage with us? If you are an MIT alumni or affiliate, you can join us through Infinite Connection and just go there and select the Social Entrepreneurship Alumni Group, and you get instruction to join. If you are not MIT alumni, then you can join our SEAG LinkedIn group, and you can join there if you're alumni also, and that's where at this point we're doing most of our community discussions. So you can post questions for SEAG officers, webinars, speakers, or provide suggestions for future programming. And what I would say is get active with us and spread the word that we exist, and let's together build this community. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Wendy, but before I start, let me just go through a couple logistics. There is a Q&A button on your screen, and that is what you should use to type in your questions. You can type it in live as you have these questions, but we will not get to them until both Wendy and John are done. So we're going to leave about 20 minutes for Q&A. So encourage you to type it in, and we will review them at the end of the two presentations. Okay, Wendy, take it away.
Thanks, Sayuri, and so nice to be here with everybody. Sayuri asked if I'd give a little background first to how I got to where I am today, and so I'm gonna do that, I think, for a moment, and then I will share the slides. So I started my early stage investing journey back in the mid-90s. In 1997, I was the co-founder of a fund called Women's Growth Capital Fund here in Washington, D.C. is where we were based, but we were investing in women entrepreneurs around the entire country. And back then, you know, we started the fund because we looked around and said women aren't getting venture capital at nearly the rate that men are. And, you know, maybe 3% of deals go to women, et cetera. The stats you've all heard a lot. And at that time, we didn't call it gender lens. We didn't call it social impact. There was social impact investing at the time was going on, but we were really looking at investing in women entrepreneurs who were doing not necessarily social impact, could be doing anything. And in fact, I was really looking for women who were doing mainstream kind of companies that would be unusual for women to be doing. That was 1997. And then in 1999, we started a group of women angel investors in the DC area. And it was really the first pooled fund of women doing angel investing. There were affiliations of women in a couple of cities on the coast, and this was a pooled fund of active women angel investors. Those portfolios ran off, and I stayed involved in the angel investing world by working with international angels and running the international exchange at the annual Angel Capital Association conference, which I did for 8 years, and met John several years ago back then. And thought I was kind of done with being involved with a fund. And then in 2014, Alicia Robb came to me, sorry, 2015, I guess. And I'm gonna, I guess, share my slides now. And create a slideshow here, actually, sorry. It's not in slideshow mode, so apologize for that. Here we go. And Alicia came to me and said, you know, women aren't getting investment capital at nearly the same rate that men are getting investment capital, and women-owned investors are doing, women-owned businesses are performing well, and we need to get more women to be angel investors to get more capital to women entrepreneurs. And I said, well, this is a story that really hasn't changed since I did this in the late 90s. So what attracted me to her, and see if I can move this slide, which doesn't want to move forward. There we go. What attracted me was that the issues were still the same, but I thought we could deal with them in different ways. So women are out there, they have the capital. And one of the reasons they don't do angel investing is they're unfamiliar with it. They have limited access to other angels or other women they know doing it. They're reluctant to go forward doing something that they feel they know nothing about, whether it's from the portfolio point of view or the terms of angel deals or early stage investing. And quite often the minimums to get into funds or angel groups are pretty high. So we decided we were going to create a fund that engaged more women as entrepreneurs and investors and provided a competitive financial return. And we're going to do it in a way that made it very accessible for women. So here's a little bit of the history. We started out with a fund called Rising Tide, which was a pilot, a one-year pilot, $1 million. pilot that launched in 2015 and a parallel fund in Europe that was a €1 million fund. And we engaged 99 women investors and created an investment committee. And I'll go over the structure in a minute. That fund, after the pilot period was over, Alicia and I were in conversation, and she said one day we were looking at a deal, we were doing due diligence on a deal, and it was a hot deal in Silicon Valley, but it had a product that neither of us particularly cared about. And we both came to the conclusion in the same moment that we really didn't want to spend any more time, energy, or money on doing deals in companies that we just didn't care about what they were doing. So she wanted to create the next wave fund, and we decided it would be impact only. And we launched that in 2017. Again, similar kind of structure that I'll talk about with 99 women LPs and investing in women entrepreneurs. And we had 4.25 million. We've done 13 investments in that to date. So we're almost done with our primary investment period. We're looking for about another 3 investments, and then we will be doing only follow-ons. Others that came out of that initial pilot have launched new funds. Rising Tide Europe has launched new funds. Portfolio, which was the original platform that we did Rising Tide on, has launched new funds. And we at Next Wave are about to launch a new fund sometime probably in Q2 this year. So as I said, we have 99 investors, which is the max here that you can do with a small fund that's that before the SEC raised that to 250. But when we closed the fund, we had the 99 max. Our investors are in 26 states and 8 countries. And so we have great diversity in our LPs. And we have an investment committee of 10 more experienced angel investors. And our structure is such, and what I really love about it is we engage all the LPs as much as they want to be engaged. All pitches are done virtually. Everybody's invited to all pitches. The investment committee screens the deal first, chooses 2 deals to pitch each month virtually. And then 2 members of our investment committee form a due diligence team and lead the LPs in the due diligence. It takes no experience to be on the due diligence team. It's about education. We do look for our LPs who have experience in the particular vertical that we're looking at. But we welcome all the LPs that want to participate so they can learn and contribute at the same time. And we invest in seed and some pre-seed, mostly seed, and some Series A. We're investing almost exclusively in women. And we are looking for deals that come from all around the country. Our investment committee members come from probably in 10 different cities. Actually, 2 of them are out of the country now. So we cover a lot of geography. And the deals, this is actually the social impact column on this particular slide speaks to our second fund, which will focus on sustainability or social justice and gender and racial equity. Our existing fund covers a wide range of verticals in the impact space. So we have EdTech, FinTech, healthcare, a variety of others. I'll show you the portfolio in a moment. So as I mentioned, our process is the companies apply. Mostly we get them from our existing networks. Since our 10 investment committee members are in 10 different cities, we have a lot of deal flow that we all bring. Our LPs also bring deal flow, and we get a lot from our collaboration partners, other social impact groups, and just in general. Some come in over the transom. We screen them. We have two companies pitch every month, and we do an assessment process among everybody that's listened to the pitch, and that could be live or recorded. We do a survey monkey to see what people think of it and whether we should go forward to due diligence. We will do that if we have 2 IC members who are up for leading that charge, and then convene the team. We try to move as quickly as we can. We try to leverage due diligence that's done by our partners, so we're not always doing stuff from scratch. And then we summarize that in a deal memo, and the investment committee votes on every deal. This is what our portfolio looks like. This is the first half. I'll show you the second slide. So it's geographically diverse. We cover a lot of SDGs, and we will pare that back in the second fund, but the first fund has been pretty broad. We come up with impact measures for each company based on either our own criteria or some general industry impact measures. And as I said, we're starting a second fund. We'd like this one to be larger. We are looking for a $20 million fund so we can have more impact in the market in general. We will do some pre-seed investments and try to bring them in small cohorts so we can really help develop those entrepreneurs, and look for a larger portfolio. Again, trying to find regions outside the hotbeds of San Francisco, Boston, and New York. We are looking for some anchor investments from foundations. Happy to welcome male investors, and will continue to encourage female investors, those who are accredited but may not have experience, by having the as a subscription. You can see that's over 3 years, so $30,000 over 3 years, $10,000 a year, trying to make it really accessible and encourage people to try doing this and learn about this kind of investing. And I've got other appendices, but I think that's probably enough, and I'm going to stop that for now. And that's sort of my initial presentation.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Let me turn it over to John. John, take it away.
Hi, thanks, Sayuri, and thank you, Wendy, for your presentation. Hi, yeah. So as you can hear from my accent, I grew up more in the UK and not in the US. And my background was one of a European student. So I went to business school in France, and then started a business in Switzerland. And if I can get to change the slides, there we go. As you can see there, then my first business, and the one that I ran from startup through to exit for about 15 years, was in the medical device area. So we're quite far removed from what we do today in impact investing and in seed investing. But my background is very much one of an entrepreneur, and living through the entrepreneurs, both challenges, dilemmas, passion, to take a startup from to scale. And when we sold, we had about 800 employees, and so we saw a lot and learned a lot as well along the way. But you know, it was time to move on, and I say we. This is my wife and I. We were part of the selling team. And then we had to decide what was the next step for us. And in our entrepreneurial journey, we'd always tried to take a part of our profits and support local social projects here in Switzerland, and also some international, more traditional charity and philanthropic projects in India, Latin America, and Africa. We knew that wasn't sustainable. If we were going to be looking at that as a sort of almost as a second career. And so I was introduced into the world of microfinance, and still do a little bit of work in microfinance today with an organization called MCE Social Capital. But ultimately, I'm not a banker and I'm not a financial services person. I am an entrepreneur. And in 2010, when we really started out in our journey, we found ourselves visiting different countries we'd never been to before, and visiting, you know, different conferences, and a totally new sector for us. And I ended up a little bit like a kid in a sweet shop or a kid in a candy store, because there were a lot of startups looking for seed capital and typical angel investor support. And we were sort of like, wow, does that mean we can actually invest in this type of thing, and these sorts of things exist? And we were really quite surprised and taken aback that we would be in a position to be able to invest in that. And that's, you know, 10 years ago. Our focus today is emerging markets. So contrary to what Wendy does, which is centered around the US, we're about emerging markets, which is very, very broad, of course. We're sector agnostic as well, but we do focus on the pre-seed and seed stage. So it really is just about startups, and more latterly, we've liked to include a degree of technology, of course, technology-enabled companies into the target for what we look to invest in. So housed within 1-4, 1-4 is the name of both a Swiss foundation and a US 501c3. In Switzerland, we call them foundations, so it's a little confusing for the US side. But we have two 501c3s, one in Switzerland and one in the US. So 2010, as I was saying, we started to do direct deals, and we are doers. We're intuitive. We do by learning, or learn by doing, I should say. And we started investing, making mistakes along the way. And we found that over the first 3 or 4 years, by doing our direct deals, then entrepreneurs were having to spend a lot of time with a lot of people who were struggling really to make the investment decision in a startup, where really in terms of due diligence, there's relatively little due diligence you can do. It really is, there is a PowerPoint presentation, there is a team, there is an idea, there may even be the starting of operations, but there's very little benchmarking available outside of the microfinance space, at least. So with a few deals under our belts, we started to see that there was almost like 3 categories of investor. The entrepreneurial types like us, who are happy to take the risk and not have answers to everything and get on and do it. There were investors who maybe from an approach point of view were a lot more analytical than we are. And that fits certain businesses and certain entrepreneurs certainly a lot better than we will be a fit for them. And then there was a whole swathe of potential investors who would spend a long time and ultimately end up saying no for various different reasons, but a lot of time wasting for both the investor themselves, but also for the entrepreneur. And that's when we sort of, rather than just being a little frustrated by it, we decided to try and develop some type of model where we may be able to encourage people to get beyond the questions and actually get into the actual investment side of what we do. So we devised this program called GiftVest, which hopefully you can see on the screen now, the very simplified diagram. The clue is in the name, GiftVest. So basically we take in donated capital into a 501c3 in the US and into the Swiss equivalent. We pool that capital and we make investments. And we invest in pre-seed and seed stage social enterprises in emerging markets. And then over time, we hope to recover the investment, of course. These are all for-profit businesses that we invest in. We're all looking for sustainable, scalable businesses, which will make a difference. And then the idea is that you get into, from a fund point of view, you might like to think about it as an evergreen type fund, where any capital which is recovered from the investee, which is paid back out at the exit of the investment, just goes back into the initial pool and then is reinvested elsewhere. So we have today 3 pots of capital, and I'll show you the portfolio in a little while. So 3 pots of capital. First and foremost is what my wife and I have been investing privately. The second pot of capital is what the 501c3 and the Swiss equivalent invest into social enterprises. And then the key for us for doing that model was really to get our donors to become investors. And so we really try and encourage our donors to read about the businesses that we are investing in, and hopefully feel motivated to and enthusiastic about not all of the businesses, because certain businesses talk more to different people, but certainly to be able to reach out and to the entrepreneurs and then start looking at becoming investors at a later stage to what we're investing in, to become investors in those same businesses. From a deal flow and pipeline point of view, we have really no issues of a lack of deal flow or a lack of pipeline. I think because we are active and we do make investment decisions, we have a good network. Word of mouth works wonderfully well, and attending different events, conferences, field visits, referrals from our own investees, accelerators, incubators, and a whole host of other sources. Deal flow really of good quality investees comes along quite readily. How do we decide whether to invest in something? We have a few initial filters. Do we like the space? Do we think that our capital, which is relatively limited, is going to somehow make the difference within that business? So we tend to steer away from businesses which are more capital intensive. You might think about things like affordable housing or certain infrastructure, energy or infrastructure type projects, which may require a lot more seed capital than what we're in a position to provide. Do we understand the impact that the entrepreneur is trying to create? Has the entrepreneur made a decent business case? That's almost the third filter that we have here. We know that the business model is probably not going to be the one that is pitched to us. But if the investees and if the entrepreneur has been able to articulate a sound reasoning in the economic model, that gives us a comfort that even if the business does pivot over time, then the entrepreneur understands the mechanics of business. And then we look especially for scalable businesses. I'm sure like most people, we're looking for businesses that can really make a difference. And operating in emerging markets, there are so many obvious markets that maybe almost counterintuitively one might think that trying to develop a business in tough places, rural or urban, that it might be difficult to think about that market side. But if you're in financial services, if you're in access to energy, clean water, and so many other spaces in the emerging markets, there are just obvious markets there. So we tend to just steer away from those that are more convoluted, business propositions that come in where the entrepreneur is almost trying to create a new market that doesn't flow naturally from those big picture numbers that everybody looks at and sees in terms of obvious needs of products and services for people living in emerging countries. Having gone through that, which is a relatively short checklist, then of course it's all about the team and the entrepreneur, because the team or the entrepreneur, because that's really all we have to go on when we're investing at a pre-seed level. And there are two aspects to that. One is, do we feel the passion, the drive, and also some relevant experience in what the entrepreneur is trying to achieve? And then secondly, while we are discussing with them, do we feel that there's a reasonable chemistry between us? If I ask 3 or 4 questions and the entrepreneur doesn't understand my questions or gives answers which sort of I don't understand, the chances are that we're probably not going to be a good fit as an investor for them. It doesn't mean that they're not a good business that somebody else might want to invest in, but it just may mean that we're not really on the same wavelength as the entrepreneur, and we have difficulty understanding each other. So it might not be the right choice. And especially what we do try to do is give a quick no. If we know that we're not going to invest in a certain business, we tell them, and we tell them why, and then they can move on. They can move on to somebody else, and they don't waste their time, which is very, very precious in the fundraising cycle. They don't waste their time trying to convince me. They have a very clear no and the reasons why. And yeah, decisions are made in a relatively short space of time, and we have literally made investment decisions after an hour on the phone with somebody. And generally, we tend to make an investment decision within 2 or 3 weeks. Sometimes it's a little more complicated to actually reduce that into the signing of the check and the sending of the funds, because we're sometimes working in reasonably exotic markets. But generally, on the principle of the matter, we will have given the green light to the entrepreneur to say we will invest. Now shifting slides to a little bit about what we have done over the last 10 years. Here on this matrix, you'll see a whole bunch of logos. Each logo, of course, is a legal entity in which we've invested. We've done a little over 50 companies, about 70 transactions, because some we've done some follow-on funding for. And when we've invested on average about $150,000 into each business, but that is spread across those 3 pools of capital I mentioned earlier, whether it's our own private capital, the non-profits capital, or what our donors have invested off their own balance sheets. As you can see, it is multi-geography. Some businesses are aiming to be global. Obviously, in an early stage, none of them are global when they start, but they have a business model which can expand across geographies, across continents. And as you can see as well, I said earlier, we're pretty sector agnostic. We're in a lot of different sectors. Also because we want to try, and one of our missions is to try and just enthuse other people to get involved in impact investing. So if we're too narrow at the focus, we may not capture an interest from potential investors who want to get involved. If we're, for example, just doing education in India, which is a very valid space to be in, but it would be too narrow of a focus for us. We always seek a very, very minority investment. We don't look for board seats. As you can appreciate, with 50 odd investments, we can't be on 50 boards. In terms of how those businesses have done, the first ones were invested in 2010, 2011, and we've ramped up over time. But our investees have gone on to raise over $300 million of additional follow-on capital. Clearly, the early starters that are still there and functioning and operational and profitable today have raised the lion's share of that capital. And we have about 50% female founders and 50% male. Where we're a little weaker is on the international founders as opposed to local founders, where we're still only at about 30% of local founders, whether that's in Africa or India or Latin America. And about 70% of our founders are US or European founders who are mainly living in country. So they are living in Africa, they are based there, or they are living in India and based there. But they've come from America or Europe and gone to set up their companies in those emerging markets. Yeah, I think just to wrap up, then I'd say both as a family activity with my wife and I, it's something special. It's something special for our children as well. It matches our conviction, our values, the passion we have. It's fun, which is great. We've tried to sort of get to this, can we do this as a tribe type approach by having the GiftVest model and encouraging others to join us and benefit from the work that we do. Clearly, that has both huge advantages and only a few drawbacks. But maybe we can get into that in the Q&A if anybody wants to dig down into that side of things. Yeah, I think for now I'll probably just wrap it up there and pass it back to Siri. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. So before I turn over to questions from the audience, I wanted to start with a couple questions, and the first one is for Wendy. So I think John it takes a less quantitative approach in terms of his due diligence, and he spoke quite a bit about how he decides. Maybe Wendy, you can speak a little bit more about what your process for due diligence is, and maybe also specifically, what do you include in this investment memo that the GP provides for the LPs?
Okay, so John said a lot of stuff that sounded quite familiar to me. Number one, early on, there's not a ton often that you can do if you're looking at a seed stage, certainly pre-seed deal. With a Series A, you've got some a little bit of track record, and that starts becoming important. But at the earliest stages, it's an awful lot about the entrepreneur and how you feel about that person and their response to questions and the way that they explain their thoughts and what their efforts are. And I guess I would say about the business model, you know, I easily fall in love with entrepreneurs all the time. And it's really important to look at the business model and understand how they're thinking. And as John said, understand that much of the time, not always, but much of the time, that business model will be tweaked and be altered as it meets the reality of the market, and the entrepreneur figures out that what they thought was going to sell isn't going to sell, but maybe something else can. And it's the really capable entrepreneurs who can figure that out and can, pivot's maybe too strong a word, but keep tweaking and keep adjusting and really take the market feedback. So that's one of the things that we look at for sure in the beginning. Does the business model that they're starting with sound reasonable? So the investment memo will have that in it. It will have financial projections, but financial projections, I come at this, I do have a finance background. I have an MBA. I come at this always looking at financials, not from the point of view of whether they're achievable, because they never are, but are they grounded in any sort of sense? And when I see financial projections that are just so completely absurd and out of line, then I really query whether the entrepreneur has any kind of structured way of thinking about the financials of this business. And that always makes me highly skeptical. And I wonder who is in there doing the thinking with the entrepreneur about how the business could grow. In terms of what else is in the investment memo, we always try to have something about the industry if we can and what's going on with the market or the industry sector. And look, I'm very, very big on personal references. I certainly will make reference calls to whoever the entrepreneur has given us, but I also try to explore other people who might know the entrepreneur and kind of get some other references. And I like to co-invest because I like sharing perspectives and intelligence and reactions with other investors who are in it along with me, trying to figure out if this is a reasonable deal.
Thank you, Wendy. So this is my question to John. So you've been involved for 10 years and have done over 50 deals in that 10 years. Can you talk about a little bit about how the social, the business side of social entrepreneurship, whether or not you have seen changes in the last 10 years, and also how much capital is being co-invested with you from your donors? John?
Yep, sure. Let me go back onto video, sorry. So I mean, the changes that we've seen in 10 years has been, I'd say predominantly it's been in terms of sector. We've seen many, many more sectors coming online. When we first started, a lot of it was around microfinance. So it was a step away from microfinance, and I think building away from microfinance, whether that was, towards different types of financial service companies, whether it was, SME financing or asset leasing, and other areas of financial services, and then shifting into areas where the financial service model was particularly important. Access to energy, for example. And of course, both distribution and finance, access to finance, are two horizontals that affect every business, but also within the impact space, we always come back to, that's great, you've got a product, but how are you going to get it to market? How are you going to fund? How are you going to do the inventory financing? How are you going to get it to market? And it's that lack of business opportunity there, which we've seen reduce somewhat, but is still a marked thing for us, is that we're seeing more and more of those layers of access to finance and last mile distribution coming along now. Whereas before, maybe 10 years ago, we would see financial services on one side and products on the other. And from our own approach, we've tended to steer away from product investments in the last 7 or 8 years. And there are a lot of, to give an example, there are a lot of cook stoves available on the market now. And so my feeling is that the world probably doesn't need another 10 different types of cook stove. What we need to be able to do is get those cook stoves into market. And that touches the whole of the supply chain and then the last mile distribution. So those will be a shift towards services, and not a shift away from microfinance, but a building on microfinance to go out into other areas of the economy. And then you asked about capital. I think I mentioned, so 2 things about capital. Our average deal size is about $150,000, and in the last 2 years, the leverage that we get from our donated capital is about, funnily enough, given the name of our organization, 1 to 4, is about 1 to 4. So for every dollar that the 501c3 or the Swiss equivalent invests, our donors are coming in and investing about $4 alongside us. And the other thing I would say is that the deal sizes are really matching into what Wendy was mentioning. We never invest by ourselves. There are always co-investors. And the typical deal size or the typical fundraise size for what we're getting involved in ranges from about $200,000 to about $500,000. That's the sweet spot for where we get involved. Where we place our average 150,000 is in a round of, on average, about $350,000. And there's usually 2, 3, 4 co-investors alongside us.
Thank you, John. Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
Something that I realized as John was talking that I think is a shift, which is the kind of capital being deployed for these companies. So it's really interesting that John's created a model that is taking philanthropic capital going into private companies rather than into not-for-profits. And we're doing the same thing, and we could easily be side by side in a deal. And in fact, I saw one company on his chart, which is one of the very first companies we had looked at Next Wave and passed on a few years ago. So for me, that's a really interesting evolution in this space that I don't know if we call it blended capital. I don't know what we call it, but, and also in our fund, what I neglected to mention is one of our LPs is a donor advised fund. And the donor advised fund has probably 8 members. And we thought that that was a really interesting way to get more capital both into our fund, but from people who were not accredited investors, wanted to look at private deals and get experience, but wanted to do it with philanthropic capital. So we're going to continue to do that going forward. And it's really, it's what John is doing in a big way. And we're taking just a sort of a little bit, tiny piece of that is using it as a way for people to get into our fund differently. But the whole notion that you can take both philanthropic capital and regular, whatever we're calling it, non-philanthropic, and put it into private deals is really interesting to me. I'm very involved with an incubator for social entrepreneurs here in DC called Halcyon. And what I've noticed in the cohorts at Halcyon since it started about 5 years ago when we're in cohort 12, I think, we started out with entrepreneurs, maybe a third doing not-for-profits and 2/3 doing for-profits. And now it's 90% of them are doing for-profits, but gathering capital from as many different sources as they can. And of course, we all love non-dilutive capital going into these companies.
Just to clarify for John, I think when he talks about 1 to 4 leverage, the 1 is from GiftVest, so that's nonprofit. The 4, I believe, is from the donor's balance sheet. So that's not all nonprofit. Is that right, John?
Yeah, that's correct. And really the reason we did the GiftVest model housed within a nonprofit was really to encourage people. We just found that the investment decision was quite challenging, and we wanted to get people engaged quickly. And people think about the donated side of their capital differently to how they think about their investment side, but they want to be investing. And so we wanted to encourage them that they could invest and they could get experiences and what have you quickly and in number in a sort of a club type environment by contributing to the GiftVest program. And then that would encourage them to deploy their investment capital directly. And of course, you know, they then have that direct line to the entrepreneur. We don't get involved in the, you know, in that part of the investment. You know, people, you know, they're adults and they get involved and they decide which deals they want to get involved in or not. You know, there's no obligation for anybody to make any investments. But we were hopeful, and it turns out that it's, you know, working in that direction. We were hopeful that we would be able to be an enabler in that way, you know, dipping their toes in the water, as somebody called us, the, you know, a gateway drug into impact investing. I mean, it's an unfortunate term sometimes, but it gives the picture.
Yeah, so I both John and Wendy's funds have, as Wendy said, blended capital. There's an element to it that is nonprofit, and then there is also from people's core portfolio. Let me go to the questions, and the first question is for Wendy. It says, "Hi Wendy, was it challenging in 1997 to co-fund your first fund? What would you do differently?"
It was challenging, in part because our investment thesis that we're investing in women entrepreneurs, you know, we went to a lot of people, and a lot of the conventional investors, small VC funds in our area said, well, where are you going to find any deal flow? I never see any women entrepreneurs leading deals. And that led us to realize that actually we could have almost an exclusive path of deal flow, because there were plenty of women entrepreneurs out there, and some were reluctant to go to the mainstream VCs in our region. That said, it was definitely challenging as well to raise enough capital. We did raise 10 million, just about 10 million in private capital from limited partners, small individuals, as well as institutional money. And then we also got some SBA funding. So what would I do differently? First of all, I would not invest in the tech boom. I would have waited till after the tech bust and had better valuations. That was something that people really didn't see coming. So I will only say, lesson learned, that cycles do exist. They do not go away. There are many such cycles. And I would, I don't know, we did a lot of things well, I guess I would say. We reached out and created a big network across the country with others, not just women-focused investors, because there weren't really very many. In our region, we reached into all the local investors and angel groups and created a pretty broad network. One of the other challenges for us then is a lot of the women entrepreneurs were new to entrepreneurship. A lot of them had come out of industry and were taking some idea from their expertise in whatever their industry was and creating a startup. And the startup culture was not nearly as sophisticated. And the women in particular, a lot of them had not run small businesses. So I think I would have tried to do some kind of educational component for the entrepreneurs at the time around the challenges of really running a small business.
Thank you, Wendy. The next question is how to build an investment committee as a first-time impact investor. What all areas should be covered in the investment thesis? I don't think John has an investment committee, so let me give it to Wendy first, and maybe John can provide some of his comments as to what investment committee, pros and cons of that. So Wendy, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'll tell you about our next Wave Investment Committee, which is, because we've got 10 people, we can be pretty broad. And we probably have somebody who's someone who's a CFO, someone who's a strategy consultant, someone who's got expertise in marketing, somebody who's a teacher and has spent a career in education, someone else who's done a lot of emerging markets work and fintech work. I'm a generalist. So, I tend to look at the entrepreneur first and the business model and just kind of apply lessons learned over 20 plus years of doing this. So I would say what should be covered in the investment committee is as much breadth as you can to bring to bear to look at any deal, because you'll have a set of very different perspectives. The other thing that's really important are bringing people together who are collaborative, who are not so wedded to their own point of view that they become obstacles for reaching a consensus decision. And I'm going to answer one of the questions later on at the same time. So there's a question later on in the Q&A that says, you're a scientist by training with no finance background. Is an MBA a necessity? And I would say the scientific background is great for analyzing certain kinds of deals that you may want to be looking at and specialize in. I think that's really important. As John said, and as I said, these early deals don't have a lot to analyze. So you can be an MBA. There's not a lot of financial history. In fact, generally none to look at. The benefit from having the MBA, I think, is thinking structurally about how to look at a business and what challenges they're going to be up against and what they've got to think about as they develop the business model. So it's more a sort of way of thinking, an analytic way of thinking that I think you bring with the MBA. But it's definitely not a necessity. I think being a scientist is actually a great place to start.
John?
Yeah, maybe on the actual investment committee side. Yeah, we don't have a formal investment committee, but we do have deal reviews, and a lot of our donors like to see and get involved with. And the donors have quite broad backgrounds. We have accountants, lawyers, entrepreneurs, all sorts of different backgrounds, engineers that we have a banker that we can draw on that type of business experience. And then I think within the investment memo, I think Wendy's covered most of the points that we have during the chat. I think governance is one thing that we look at that maybe we haven't spent much time talking about. Now, clearly governance in a very early stage business is a little difficult. There may not be a particularly strong board there, but one of the things we want to be able to do is work with the entrepreneur to help them and assist them, like a typical angel investor would, is to bring stronger governance as we move towards a Series A, because we really, when you get to the Series A, it's really important to have a strong path to strong governance. And the other thing that I would add in there, because we're often operating in an international environment, some of the regulatory side of things from an investment point of view is something that we include in our investment decisions, which would be the equivalent of the investment memorandum that would go in front of an investment committee. It's sometimes challenging to provide certain types of capital to certain geographies. Getting money in and out of countries, we need to make sure that we're up to speed, both with the history, the current, and anything we're hearing about the potential future changes of any big picture regulatory stories in the countries that we're looking to invest in.
Thanks, John. The next question is for Wendy. This is from Lisa. I completely believe in the investment thesis that there are huge untapped returns that can be achieved by investing in women and minority founders. My question is whether any of the next wave funds have been around long enough to begin proving that thesis. Are there exits that are starting to show returns that would likely have gone untapped? And also, how do you assess returns from an impact standpoint?
Well, I would say first, it's pretty early days. A lot of these investments take a long time to ripen. And also one of the things we learn, and is pretty true across all early stage investing portfolios, is the stuff that is that goes bad pretty quickly. The stuff that creates the good returns tends to ripen very slowly. The first fund, our 2015, 2016 fund, we do have a couple of returns. We have one exit, and I think 2 companies that have shut down from that fund. And that was a pretty early exit after maybe 2 years. I'm personally always happy to see early exits, even if they are not huge returns, because the world is uncertain and cycles happen and world events happen that get in the way of exits. So from the next wave fund, we have no exits yet. We're still really early days. We started at the end of 2017 with our first deals. Most of them were done in 2018, 2019. They certainly are starting to come back for follow-ons. That's, you know, I guess seeing that and seeing upticks in valuation and more broader investment syndicates is the thing that we're counting on to see progress in those, as well as obviously building a business and revenues. From an impact standpoint, we really are looking at each deal individually. We try to come up with the metrics that will show that they are accomplishing something. You know, the tricky thing in this industry is to figure out, you can look at output measures, you can look at what they're doing. Does that really affect outcomes? You know, what represents change and positive change? So, you know, we have a community solar customer acquisition company. So we're looking at how many deals that they get involved in and how many customers they bring on. That's kind of an easier one to measure. We have one in refugee crisis management, and they can look at how many needs are served. But there are certainly other measures we can apply to that as well. The education ones are always tough to come up with the impact measures.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is, what impact investor networks or other sources do you both work with that help angel investors who want to invest directly, not via a fund? John.
We have no formal agreements with these, but a lot of the accelerators and the incubators are always looking for, you know, angel investors for the cohorts that go through those types of programs. There are, I mean, Sarah, you'll be able to talk more about organizations like Toniic. We personally don't work with Toniic, but I know you do. Yeah, so I think that the main ones for us are the accelerators and the incubators. Are a good source of support mechanism. You know, it's almost like you've got a pre-validation for the deals because they've successfully matured through different types of programs. So if you're starting out, I'd encourage you to look for those types of programs and some of the mentoring programs. You know, the GSBI, Agora, Village Capital, Unreasonable, and its future generations of Unreasonable within the international impact space. And I'm sure there are many that Wendy can talk to in the US. But yeah.
Well, certainly Social Venture Circle,
yes,
is that what we're calling that?
Yes,
yes.
Yeah, that's one for sure that has chapters in a lot of different cities, and you can get involved and on a national or local level and they all
Yeah.
individual.
So basically, I think our suggestion is don't try to do it just by yourself if you have never done it before, and find people that are doing it and kind of at least tag along. And I would say that, hey, John is a good guy to tag along. What is your minimum for the GiftVest for folks to become part of your?
What we ask for is that each donor provides $10,000 a year for a minimum of 5 years. So we do ask for a $50,000 commitment, but we take that in $10,000 chunks across a 5-year period. And that's what 90% of our donors, that's what they've done.
And so that's a way to do it. As Wendy talking about, Social Venture Circle is a network that have regional offices, and they invest together. And there are also social venture partners that is around US, and they may have impact investing component to that. So if you want to get more information on that, please ask a question in our LinkedIn group. And for those who may have additional questions, if you put it into our LinkedIn group, then we can try and get the answers for you. I think our time is up, and I would like to really thank John and Wendy for taking the time to speak with us, and hope that they are encouraging you to participate and start investing yourself. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.